Hello. Today we're going to be talking about a very popular subject with moms that are breastfeeding. Really, any breastfeeding moms group, it's a popular subject. But specifically, we see it a lot with low carbohydrate or ketogenic moms, and that is the supply struggle. I can't even say it. Making sure that you have enough milk for your baby without carbohydrates. So I'm excited to go over this with you to help you out, to make sure that this is not going to be an issue for you. So I'll go over, first of all, what you want to know most. The most common reasons we see moms who are restricting carbohydrates or doing a ketogenic diet, the most common reasons they might see a change in their supply. Then I'll help you identify whether or not you're having a supply issue at all, because we tend to be worried as mom about output and overly concentrated on that. So let's make sure that there's an issue at all. Then I'll go over some other reasons that you could see changes in your supply that have nothing to do with how you're eating. And the last thing I'll tell you about is what to do if you do see a dip in your supply. I have an amazing, awesome tip for how to boost supply. It works every time. It works for every breastfeeding mom, and it's just killer. So stick around to the end of the video for that. So the first thing I want to go over, why you might see a dip in your supply if you are a low carb mama or a ketogenic mama. And the first most common reason we see is because of hydration. Specifically, that moms are not properly replacing electrolytes. If you're part of our Facebook support group for keto, breastfeeding, and low carb moms, you probably hear us talk about it a lot. Properly replacing electrolytes. You might have been keto for years. You may have been keto through your whole pregnancy and never had a problem with the way that you were replacing your electrolytes before. But now that you're a breastfeeding mom and your demand for hydration has increased, all of the sudden, what you're using or what you're doing for electrolytes just doesn't work for you anymore. It's so important to take a look, first and foremost, at the recommendations for replacing electrolytes that are for breastfeeding moms and pregnant moms specifically, and to measure and use the proper forms of electrolytes. Lots of information that I have on this. I'll put a link below that you can check it out. But this is your first stop to look at. Make sure that your electrolytes are on point, not just that you haven't changed anything with how you've been replacing electrolytes, but that you're seriously looking at if you're getting the proper amounts and the proper types. So that's the number one reason we see. And when moms fix their electrolytes, they see like almost immediate improvement in their supply and in how they feel and all the other problems that electrolytes bring about. But literally by the next feeding, after increasing their electrolytes, they'll see a difference. So that's a big one. The second reason is eating plenty. You have to eat plenty when you're a breastfeeding mom. It's important for your safety and your health that you not cut calories too drastically or too low. So I will put a link below for how to find out your macros while you're breastfeeding or pregnant. It's a range because we're all different, but you want to definitely make sure that you're getting plenty of animal protein. That's the biggest concern. And we'll help you to make sure that you're hitting those goals based on evidence for how much mamas need specifically. The next thing to take a look at is my supply even dropping? I know when I started breastfeeding, it was like such a huge concern, especially with my first baby. I went back to work at a full-time corporate job, and I was pumping, and she was with a babysitter, and this was like such anxiety and concern, and so much focus and stress went into my supply and how much I was producing. I think a little bit too much emphasis is put onto this as moms. I think most of us worry too much about this when it's not as big of a concern. but I want to help you to identify things that are indications of supply dips and that are not indications of supply dip. So the first thing to look at is here's a whole list of things that freak us out as moms, but really they're not even an indication that there's anything wrong with your supply. So if the baby's nursing frequently or they cluster feed, those are all normal. When the baby gets fussy, all kinds of reasons why babies go through fussy times. If they're waking more frequently at night, doesn't necessarily mean anything's happening with your supply. If you're feeling differently, your breasts are not as engorged, or they're not leaking, or you're not feeling the let down, all those things are normal changes in your body that happen during breastfeeding. When everything is working perfectly well, those things still happen. So this whole list is not a good indication that anything's happening with your supply. Pumping can change, especially if you're nursing and pumping. The pumping is no indication of what's happening when you're nursing. They're just not correlated at all. So take a look at this list so you can rule those out if that's what you're basing your supply change on. Here are some ways you can track whether or not your baby's getting enough. You can track your baby's wet diapers. This is the easiest, basic, best way to see, is my baby getting enough? You have to track wet diapers over a 24-hour period. Check with your baby's physician to make sure that your baby's getting enough for whatever stage your baby's in. But generally, you need about 6 wet diapers for a newborn within 24 hours and 4 wet diapers if they're older than 6 weeks within 24 hours. That's a good indication that your baby is getting enough. Your pumping output, like we said, not a good indication. And if you are supplementing your baby's feedings with a bottle, that will definitely affect your supply. That will decrease your supply. Because if you're not demanding more of your body and you're giving the baby a bottle, then the baby's not going to demand that you make more, and your body's not going to respond. So the more you nurse, the more supply you will make. You can rebound it by nursing more and weaning off the bottle. Let me see if I tell you this here. Ooh, another indication of supply. So there is a small percentage of moms who start the ketogenic or low carb diet who do see a temporary dip during their transition. So this is within the first couple weeks of restricting carbohydrates. Usually it's around day 3 or 4 that we see moms say that this happens, that they do see a decrease in their supply. So keep in mind that your entire body is switching over to a brand new fuel source. It's using fats instead of carbohydrates. So during that transition of your milk making mechanisms transitioning to fat for fuel, you could see a temporary dip in supply. Within 48 hours, it should come back. You should not have a dip more than 48 hours, usually between 24 and 48 hours. Supply returns as long as you're continuing to get enough calories and you're continuing to get the proper electrolytes and hydration. So if you're doing everything right, you still may see a small dip in supply that's temporary. Continue to nurse, continue to latch, just keep doing it. Your baby will be fine, because there's other reasons our supply naturally dips as moms, like when menstruation returns. Women commonly see a small dip that's temporary in their supply for, a day or 2. So it's perfectly normal. Baby's still getting something when they're latching. There may, though, be a dip, and it should recover fairly quickly. So just keep going. Okay, so you might have changes in your supply that have nothing to do with the way that you're eating. So if you believe that your supply is low and you're doing the right calories, the right electrolytes, and it's not within the first couple weeks of transitioning to the diet, it might be time to look at some other causes for a supply dip. The most common one we see is a baby with a lip or a tongue tie. This is very common, and it restricts the baby's ability to properly remove milk from the breast, or properly communicate with the breast about how much milk it needs. So it's really, especially in the United States, I see often that it's missed or not properly diagnosed by pediatricians or even lactation consultants. So you can find an IBCLC that'll even meet with you online that can assess the baby, or a pediatric dentist that specializes in revisions for lip or tongue ties that can do an assessment on your baby to make sure that they don't have any mouth restrictions that might be causing your supply issue. Another thing we see moms have issues with their supply is when they're not nursing enough. So, babies might be good sleepers, or they just don't realize. I didn't realize before I had a baby how often you have to nurse them. Oh my gosh, it's all the time. It's not every 2 hours. It's like more frequently than every 2 hours sometimes. So you want to make sure that at least every 2 hours the baby is latching, and maybe more. For my babies, it was always more often, especially in the beginning. And that you don't go for more than a 5-hour stretch during 24-hour period. So usually that's the sleeping through the night stretch, is a 5-hour stretch, no more than 5 hours. And then for the rest of the 24 hours, it should be no more than 3 hours between nursing. So make sure baby's latching often. That'll help maintain your supply. There's less than 1% of women that have biological issues that cause them to have low supply. So that would be a diagnosis of like insufficient glandular tissue. Women that have had gastric bypass surgery can have issues making enough milk. Or if you've had a breast reduction surgery. Those are really the only reasons we see why you would biologically not be able to make enough milk. Otherwise, there should be a solution that can be found. Okay, so help! Here's what you want to do if you do have a supply dip. Life happens, and breastfeeding is not a short journey, really. It's a season of life, but it's, like 2 years of your life. So during that time, life is going to happen, and you could become ill, you could have to go away for work, and you could have a death in the family that throws you off, and you might experience a dip in your supply. So I want you to have tips of what to do. Or maybe we went through this list of things and you're like, duh, that's what I've been doing. I know exactly what I did wrong, but now I already have the dip. What do I do now? No problem. We got you covered. The first tips, what not to do. Do not grab milk boosters, please. I have heard on the page from so many women who have taken the cookies, the teas, the, milky things, and they actually experience the opposite. It makes their supply dip even more. We don't want you to reach for those things. It could negatively affect you. It could not be helpful at all. Or it could be helping a little bit, but then you're just putting a Band-Aid on the mistake. We want you to find out exactly what's going wrong and address the issue. And there's no special foods. I thought, like, with my first baby, I thought I had to eat the oatmeal in order to make milk. Like, there's no special food. I thought I had to eat the cookies, and that's what was helping me make milk. No, your body doesn't need anything special to make milk, just protein and fat. That's all it needs, real foods, nothing fancy. So focus on the true issues and just eating real nutrient-dense foods. Okay, so my other tips, this is like so good. I call it the nurse flicks and chill. If you need to boost your supply, the best thing you can do is get a chunk of time, like 48 to 72 hours, that you can just chill at home with your baby and nurse on demand. Latch the baby as often as they will possibly latch. You want to be chill. You want to be low stress, relaxed as much as possible, watching Netflix, sitting on the couch. You want to have someone to cook for you, like a husband, or make a big batch of food beforehand. I like to make big batches of, meaty chili, or big batches of like barbacoa, or a brisket, or a bunch of ribs, or a bunch of burgers, anything that'll be easy for you to serve yourself. hydrate, make sure you're getting your electrolytes, and just sit around taking your electrolytes, eating plenty of calories that are nutrient dense and protein focused, chilling out and relaxing, having plenty of skin to skin time with your baby, and nursing as much as possible. And you will see your supply recover within 48, and if you can go to 72 hours, even better. You will come back up to fully supplying that baby with all that they need. I have done it before. I have, had surgery and completely lost my milk supply, like dry, can't pump not even one drop for over a week. And doctors and nurses told me, yeah, you're probably done nursing. And I had one nurse that told me, like, you'll probably be okay if you didn't have any issues with supply beforehand and you were fully breastfeeding. You're going to be able to go back to it. Just go back to what you were doing. And God bless that nurse. I love her so much because she saved my nursing journey. I listened to her and I did this. I nursed, flixed, and chilled for 48 hours, and my supply, I could stop supplementing. They were fully breastfed after that. My baby was fully breastfed after that. So you can do it too. I want to encourage you. It takes 6 weeks of zero stimulation of your breasts in order for them to stop producing milk. So if you're still within that window, there is still hope for you. Just making sure you follow the other guidelines of what could be causing the supply issue. And if you know that and you can rectify what's causing it, then you can get your supply back up and you can fully provide milk for your baby. So I want to encourage you to do that. Even if you can't do the 48 to 70, the nurse fest, any of those tips any of those things that you do during the nurse fest are important for you to do too, until you can have that big chunk of time. So still feed yourself, get your electrolytes, have plenty of skin to skin time, and chill out. Low stress is important for supply as well. So I want to encourage you to stick with your carbohydrate restricted diet and to do it properly, and that you can still have a sufficient supply for your baby. Comment below if you have any questions on this and we can help troubleshoot those for you.